Mary McCord, I want to pick up on the storage facility. This has been something that we've known was at the center of, I don't know if it's appropriate or accurate to suggest an obstruction prong and a classified documents prong of Mar-a-Lago, but for the purposes of this conversation, let's do that today. In the obstruction prong of the Mar-a-Lago probe, this is what DOJ has written. This was a filing to the special master several innings ago in this probe. DOJ asserts this, quote, through further investigation, the FBI uncovered multiple sources of evidence indicating that the response to the May 11th grand jury subpoena was incomplete and that classified documents remained at the premises, notwithstanding the sworn certification made to the government on June 3rd. In particular, the government developed evidence that a search limited to the storage room would not have uncovered all the classified documents at the premises. The government also developed evidence that government records were likely concealed and removed from the storage room and that efforts were likely taken to obstruct the government's investigation. Now, I don't know how that plugs into the puzzle piece of Walt Nauta, but the government had information in May and June that all the classified material not only wasn't in the storage room, but that it had been moved. Tell me your sort of translation of what we're seeing, what we already knew from their filings, and what this new piece of reporting answers.
Yeah, I think that, you know, as we've talked about previously, Nicole, that time frame is key because that shows that even after getting the subpoena, or evidence that would show movement after getting the subpoena, could support an obstruction charge, right? So I think what you're seeing now, and listening to the discussion with Mike Schmidt, I agree that Walt Nauta could be a critical witness, but I wouldn't say that what Jack Smith is doing now is just simply trying to fill the gap of what they can't get from Walt Nauta if he's not cooperating. And that's because even if they had Walt Nauta as a cooperator, and even if he was sort of handing them the keys to the kingdom, they wouldn't want to go into court and bring an indictment based on just one cooperating witness. And particularly if it's somebody who they're actually thinking they might charge or use a charge or the agreement not to charge as an inducement to get his cooperation, because that's going to be something that he'll be attacked for on his credibility if he's doing this, you know, to save himself. And then just one person's word is not going to be good enough, or the department is not going to want to rely on just that. So I think they would be doing all of these same things anyway. They'd be looking at the surveillance tapes. They'd be trying to figure out if there are gaps in those tapes and why those gaps exist. They'd be talking to other people, other employees of Mar-a-Lago, to determine if what they say can corroborate Walt Nauta. And certainly we already know they've talked to one of the former president's attorneys, Evan Corcoran, and probed him, at least based on the reporting, as to what kind of questions were being asked about the movement of these boxes. The other thing they will want to do is figure out the why, right? Why would he be holding back documents? Why would he be obstructing if they are thinking about bringing an obstruction charge? And that's where I think one of the things that's interesting about the paragraph you read from the reporting about Live Golf, because one of the things we do know is that Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund owns the vast majority of that golf venture, something like 93%. We know that that sovereign wealth fund is run by the Crown Prince. So this is rank speculation, but if you are thinking about a motive, right, for President Trump potentially to be holding back documents, not providing documents, there's a number of things you could think are possible. At worst, he potentially wanted to share classified information with the Saudis. He could have been holding back information as sort of blackmail to make sure that they come through and host golf tournaments at his golf resorts. That is very, very lucrative for the former president. It could be that he wrote notes on some documents that, pertain to the Saudis that he doesn't want the federal government to see. It could be that he just does the Donald Trump thing and thinks it's cool to have these documents. And there's lots of reasons, and it's really speculative for me to even be saying what I just said. But the point is, if you're DOJ, you're looking for the why, because you've got to be able to tell a jury, if you do bring a case, why? What is the modus operandi? What is the motivation? What is the intent? And following the money, following possible places of vulnerability and weakness that might have motivated Trump to do some of the things that it's looking like there may be evidence that he did, that is, have boxes moved, attempt to obstruct justice, that's going to be a focus of the investigation.
Mary,